now. And this is what we're mentioning in terms of the fact that we have all this really warm air. We're starting to return back into the mid to upper 80s off to the southwest. And meteorologist Lance Blocker continues to work his way down 44 in areas off to the west. This is an incredibly favorable environment right now for serious severe weather development. And I know that we're talking about this tornado warning right now, but notice how temperatures continue to rise back into the upper 70s. These areas where it's been raining in the low 60s, still, I'm telling you what, even though it's been raining, watch these numbers climb even closer to 70, and I bet you Chesterfield is not going to be far off of 80 degrees. I know it says 70 at the bottom of our screen, that says the airport. I will bet you it's in the mid-70s very, very quickly. And as I mentioned, it has to do with this boundary, and we watch where that continues to lift. Watch how storms have moved, as our visible satellite is a good opportunity for where these boundaries are and why the heat of the day is very important. We watched those storms that moved through this morning to the north. Well, guess what? It looks like they're going to continue to push to the south, and then all of a sudden this warm air mass lifts north, and that's where that unstable air is, out ahead of that line of storms out to the west. That's why we have a moderate risk for severe weather. May not mean much at the surface. 4 out of 5 from the Storm Prediction Center. We hardly ever see a high risk anywhere, let alone our area, and a moderate risk is pretty rare for us as well because of the increased threat for severe weather and large, damaging, long-track tornadoes. That's still in play. Our severe weather impacts remain in place with that because of 60 to 80 mile an hour wind, still not out of the question, but also up to baseball-sized hail and longer duration tornadoes. Stronger tornadoes are not out of the question. So that's what and we also have seen flash flooding in a few areas. I know it's kind of a side note because this is the stuff that grabs your attention, but that is also something we're going to deal with later on. I do want to show you exactly how this is all set up because I want to put the Futurecast on with storm energy to kind of show you exactly why maybe we've added the tornado watch back into Pike and Greene counties, and also just what's going on because we have this expansive coverage where even to the south, this is even out of our metrics, right? I mean, if it's so high, it's out of the color table. That's how you know it's an impressive warm air mass that is starting to work its way in. Now, the redevelopment here, you also look at storms that develop along that. That's what we're watching out for within the next hour or so. And once it happens, it's going to take advantage of this significant problem throughout the entire area. And as we watch that for the next several hours, hour or two, I think once we get it going, there's really nothing to stop them, right? And what's going to happen is we'll see these storms develop by themselves. Those are the ones that have the capability to absolutely rapidly bubble up, create that up to baseball size hail, and rotate on their own. They're going to follow all these twisting winds that are around the atmosphere, whether or not it's the south here or southeast here or these boundaries or this cold front behind it. All that stuff comes together, and that's where you see the classic storm structure. Now, at some point through the evening, 6, 7 o'clock, they'll probably push their way into a line. This becomes a wind threat with some of those weaker tornadoes on the leading edge of it, but then it pushes through and we're done overnight. So, Scott, to me, that's what we watch out for right now specifically is as we've not had any confirmed tornadoes that we've seen. We've had multiple tornado warnings, and that one is maybe there are a couple of spots that are showing up where there's rotation, and it's one of those, well, I'm not sure if it's a tornado. The radar's indicating it. We're trying to get some eyeballs on it. These storms, there are going to be plenty of eyeballs on, and I think we're going to see the potential for significant severe weather just based on everything that's kind of set up. And this is kind of maybe a good warning that we have everybody out of school and things like that, the after-school activities, because within the next hour, I think it could get really aggressive.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And, you know, I'm going to get you a camera here up in Grafton in a second. Tornado warning extended here into northern parts of St. Charles County, southern portions of Calhoun County into southeast portions of Jersey County and the northwest corner of Madison County. And it does include far northern portions of St. Louis County. This is basically along and north of Lindbergh in North St. Louis County. That's what we're looking at. That's the new tornado warning. Again, it's a circulation, radar indicated rotation at this point and moving off towards the northeast. We're going to try to get you a camera here because that storm is moving into this area I think I've got it up there. It will be moving into this area here around Grafton. Okay, so that's a look at Grafton right now, and you can clearly see it's pouring rain at the moment. So the storm is picking up, coming in. Let's see if I can turn that a little bit to the west here so we can look back a little more into St. Charles County. Give me just a split second here as we do that. Again, we're not talking about confirmed tornadoes. We're talking about radar indicated spin on these tornadoes or on these storms. And the environment right now is not especially conducive for the big tornadoes, but we think the environment is going to grow and become more conducive as time goes on. So here we are, we're spinning around. We're looking now back more into this northern part of St. Charles County, and that's where the threat is, and that's where the more intense part of the storm is. I think I am zoomed out about as far as I can get out on this camera. But kind of looking at that, it almost looks like that this may be your inflow into the storm. At least in this particular area where you've got that. It's either that or it's a shelf cloud. So we continue to track that across the area. That's the Grafton camera right now that you're looking at. And, you know, Grafton is under the tornado warning at this point. Here's the broader perspective across our area. Thunderstorms are really getting ramped up back here in mid-Missouri. We're going to be watching those because they're going to have better ingredients. Here's your tornado warning. It's the southern part of this system, kind of where that hook was. But again, it's a hook that doesn't have the humid air with it. It's close to the humid air, but the humid air is not really feeding into the storm. If that starts happening, then this storm really starts twisting, because at this moment, looking at the winds aloft, the amount of shear that we have, we're at 70 knots. So that's almost 80-mile-an-hour winds for shear across the region. That's just like a vacuum cleaner, adding lift to these storms. So the potential is certainly there this afternoon. What we're missing right now with this storm is really the fact that we don't have a lot of low-level humidity feeding into it. And that means the instability is not as great as it could be, and yet it's still rotating and still potentially producing a tornado at some point. So that's something we got to continue to moderate here. So
you can move the camera from the airport to look at this a little better or not?
I don't know.
I guess I can look at it as well. I've got it up. But I think you're right. I mean, I think that's the one spot where, you know, I don't know how well we're going to be able to see it, but that's definitely our one spot. It feels like this is the best that any one of these has looked in a while. Yeah,
and I'm going to go back for the Grafton camera. I don't know. You know, the Weather Service was saying they got a report somebody that they saw a tornado on this camera, and I do not at this point see it right now for sure, but the clouds are feeding into it. So I don't know if that's the shelf cloud or if that's actual inflow in that storm. It could be either or it could, yeah. So we're looking now, that's looking south from Grafton. So we'll go back looking more towards the west. And again, I'm kind of looking at that myself. Let me share it with you so you can see what we're looking at here. You know, because the Weather Service is asking, and I don't see anything. I don't know that the airport's going to be able to give us.
No, I can't find anything on the airport either. I'm looking at it offline.
Yeah.
It's not,
so this is looking at Grafton. We're looking off to the west. So this is over in St. Charles County. We definitely have, you know, the heavy rain, and we definitely, you know, have a low cloud base, but I don't see anything at this point that is screaming, you know, that there's a tremendous problem there right now. But again, we still have the tornado warning in effect, and it includes Grafton at this moment. And so let's kind of zoom back in on this, and we'll see what we got for you. We got a lot going on this afternoon, and it's only going to get busier as the afternoon wears on. It looks like the circulation would generally be, you know, we're looking from Grafton. Okay, so here's Grafton. That camera, okay, Grafton is right here. that camera that we were looking at was looking at this part of the storm. So it would be more to the southwest where there might be a circulation, but I did not see anything on that a few minutes ago. But that's where there's going to be, if there is something, that's where it's going to be. So let's pop this velocity on here. Certainly there's, a fair amount of wind here. When you get into those brighter blues, I don't necessarily see a tight couplet, but I do see some strong gusty winds. And of course, you're in an area here where you're right along the river, and you put that wind that's in the river valley and then put it up against the bluffs, and it certainly can cause some damage there. So that's what we're looking at this point across the St. Louis area. This is north of town, but it does include far northern portions of St. Louis County, this tornado warning, and it includes eastern portions of St. Charles County. So northern St. Louis County right here, northern and eastern portions of St. Charles County, southern portions of Jersey County, and the northwest corner here of Madison County. So Lewis and Clark Community College and Godfrey down to Alton. This is Highway 94 through St. Charles, up into West Alton, through the Orchard Farm area. And here you're going into North County. You're basically where 67 meets up with 367 here in North County. You're into a lot of farm fields in those areas in North County, but the circulation and the stronger winds look to be up here towards Campbellsville right now and pushing off towards the northeast. And again, I'll give you one look at the wind on this monitor, and then I'll take the storm relative winds in there. And while there's some strong winds showing up, I am not seeing a tight circulation, Gary. I mean, you look at that, Gary. Do you see a tight circulation?
I don't, but I can see what they're doing and why they've warned it, right? I think that's, and we even I've got a message from Mike McKenna in Darden Prairie, and he saw some definitive rotation about 10 minutes ago just east of Darden Prairie. So there's obviously rotation, and it's starting to be visible, right? And that's, I think, the main thing that, when you look at where this is, right? From a radar perspective, like you said, this looks like a tornado just purely from a radar perspective. If nothing else, right, you have somewhat of a classic storm structure, but I want to point this out before we have the area that I show you on the radar velocity product, right? We have the storm structure where, let's say this is moving in this direction, right? Let's say all the wind is moving here. Well, we also have the wind, this inflow wind, which is kind of why you don't have that storm that kind of cuts in here, right? This is kind of a comma shape in a reverse, right? So let's just call it an S here, but you have this wind that's kind of sucking in at this point. Well, this is the reason for that. Now, those clouds may be lower, but as let's just track this just in case we have some issue, because it's not out of the question. And you're seeing this right on the leading edge of this, and I'm going to get out just ahead and try to pass right across the river, right across, let's say, Alton. And I think it's really almost at Alton at about, let's say within the next 20 minutes or so into, Lock Haven at 347, right? So let me transfer this to the different spot and watch how this has kind of progressed, and we've seen this. It really hasn't grown in any sort of storm structure, and obviously as we've looked at the camera in Grafton, it's raining so incredibly hard it's going to be difficult to see. But what is likely the case is the fact that things are starting to lower a little bit where you see all these different clouds, and that's where we're trying to find where this particular circulation is. And if we have it right now, I would say this is maybe our best look right here. And I want to zoom in just a little bit here so we can get into maybe street level and give us an idea. Near Gardnerville, south of Campbellsville, to me, this is where we're probably looking at. Here's where there's a little bit of inflow. Now, it's important to note as we have perhaps here's where the away from the radar is, and this is where toward the radar, right? So we have one side that's going in this direction right here, and then we have one wind that is going in this direction, right? Well, obviously, just by looking at it, this is more bright. And even if I just kind of, this should actually give me exactly how much the radar is sampling the wind. If I look at it from a bright perspective, I think there's no doubt this is creating some pretty good wind. The velocity there on the radar is telling me there's 61 miles an hour toward the radar. Well, we look at it from the other perspective. If I just click the red, it's not as impressive, right? It's certainly not 61 miles an hour. It says 2 miles an hour. So those are the difference. If we saw 61 on one side and say 30 on the other side, well, then you're talking about a seriously tight gradient, and that's where you're talking about, hey, there's a potential. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, you look at this, and that's, kind of the same thing, right? And as I kind of look, it doesn't really show up like that necessarily as I go further to the north, but there could be some wind with that as well, right? So you look at a kind of a tale of two segments of where this storm is that's under the tornado warning. Yeah, there is a possibility that any one of these could create rotation at any given point. And this is a lot closer to that camera that we have in Grafton. And I think in all reality, you're probably starting to see this lower, and we're certainly going to have the possibility for all that wind to reach the surface of 61 miles an hour. It's not a question, but from a storm structure standpoint, now you're seeing where, you have the potential for some pretty good wind, but not as much of that inflow. We're trying to find, and what we're going to likely see later on in the day, is bright spots like this and bright spots in the red that is indicating that tight rotation that is in all likelihood reaching the surface. Now, we don't have that yet at this point, and certainly nothing from a confirmation standpoint, but if you're just sampling, even if this isn't reaching the surface all the way, and if we're sampling this, from a standpoint of wind, there's some pretty good wind with this. Doesn't mean it's a tornado, but there's some pretty good wind with some of this, right? The velocity product tells us that, yeah, there may be an 81 mile an hour wind above the surface. Even if it doesn't reach all the way, you're still getting a 60 mile an hour wind gust. And so that's important to note as we kind of follow along and try to figure out if this is actually a tornado at this point.